Hi, everybody. This is podcast episode number 334. And before you told me to start, and we're here with Hal Macomber and Felipe Engineer-Manriquez. And and this is meant lovingly, we are going to get schooled today on the production laws. Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Hal, thank you for being with us. How are you doing right now?
It's my pleasure. I'm doing okay.
Good.
Yeah, it's finally, the sun is out in New Hampshire. It's been raining since last week.
Okay. Well, Felipe, do you want to announce where we are right now?
Yeah, we're in beautiful St. Louis, Missouri, the Show Me State, where we just got shown some beautiful tech plans on a multi-$100 million construction project, Hal. And we're applying some of the laws. You're going to give us some more information today. So I'm super excited. Jason's like, get over here. I was like, you got it, man. Sign me up.
We've been implementing, or I've been implementing, I'm not going to float anybody else into the negativity, but the production laws, even not knowing what the heck they are, and they've already changed my life in like 3 weeks. So Hal, we are ready to go. We're not going to waste any time with any podcast scaffolding. Lace us with some game, Mr. Lean Guru. Just so you know, we love you. Like, you are like up here. Yeah. You are like lean champion #1. Tell us everything.
Well, thanks. So, so these production laws have been around for a long time. In fact, one of my earliest references goes back to, I think it's 1920 something, where a Brit, I wish I had the names. I didn't know what we were going to do today, so I don't have access to that stuff. But it was a Brit that began writing about mass production and flow production in the 1920s. That material got into the hands of Toyota. And sometime we think around 1945 to 50, that time period. And the rest of the world didn't learn about it. I mean, it was from the UK. They weren't known for being great manufacturers, still aren't really known for being great manufacturers. And so that was lost. I think the guy's name was Woolard, if I remember right. But I'll get you the actual reference on that. So the idea of pursuing flow as kind of like the preferred way of doing any production work, whether it's the physical production work or it's abstract work, like the work that an architect or an engineer does. You know, when architects and engineers get out of flow, you have problems. You have rework. They lose track of what they were doing, right? And it's like, in other words, their humanness shows up in the middle of things. And so flow applies universally to what we're doing, and yet, at least in the lean construction community, most people don't know that. So a couple things. In 1999, Lean Construction Institute, white paper number 3, written by penned by Iris Tomaline, but I think Glenn Ballard was a co-author on it. But Iris did the writing and the background work. She said that we must be using a continuous flow approach. That's at the ground. You put last planner on top of that to make the flow approach work. So that's how many years ago? 22 years ago.
Yeah.
That same year, I did at the Neenan Company in Fort Collins, Colorado. I was the chief operating officer. We did our first Takt plan project. That's 1999. We learned about it in 98, and we did our first one in 99. We eventually did a middle school. I forget how big it was, but we did it in a whole middle school attached to a parochial school. So the parochial school was something like K through 5, and we added 6 through 8 to it, along with science labs and all kinds of other spaces. It might have been a basketball court or something. It goes back a ways. We did all that in 17 weeks.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. Now, we also had on-site prefabrication. We set up plants. We did a number of things. So what happened with the building was install. No fabricate, no measure, no cut, none of that fabrications and assembly steps. To the extent that we could avoid it, we were doing that, which is key today. I mean, if you really understand the production laws, you do want to take variation out of the process. The law of variation being one of the laws. You want to take variation out of the process, and the best way to do it is, I mean, something as simple as a shower valve assembly. You don't want plumbers in a wood-framed multi-residential building with torches in small spaces, right? Putting shower valve assemblies together or anything else, right? Do that in a shop, bring it all in, make compression fitting, use compression fittings. You're all set, right? None of that stuff. All goes easy, no variation, and you go from there.
I'd like to say something because there's a lot unpacking, and Felipe, just pretend this is your podcast. So speak up whenever you want. And I love it when we're tag team and stuff all the last 2 days. But I have a different approach mentally than some people. I feel like we're getting back to what they were always supposed to be. Like when somebody says, "Oh, we prefabricated on site," they're like, "This is some new thing." Well, no, it's not new. There's not new at all. So I pay you reverence and respect, and everyone else who's been doing this. Like in my mind, the Hensel-Phelps Pentagon renovation used Takt. You used Takt. That the Empire State Building used certain things that were line of balance, location-based Takt-ish, and these are like decades, hundreds of years ago. And I feel like when people say I'm trying something new, no, I think it's what it was always supposed to be, and I don't know why we're not there. So that's my perspective.
That's the law of variation, Jason. That's where every human being, as Hal knows, is born with this magical gift called amnesia. And they don't know what was done before them. And the people that we encounter in the systems for different reasons, because it's complex, we have all this beautiful variation and chaos happening sometimes with how we procure and build. So it does take, to bring order back in, you do need someone like Hal to help increase awareness of what these production laws are. So we heard the law of variation.
Law of variation, yeah.
Oh,
Law of variation.
well, what is that from your perspective?
Well, I'm going to jump to Toyota just for a second and say that what we learned about lean from Womack and Jones in lean thinking and the machine that changed the world was that you have to go after Muda, Murrah, and Murray. You have to go after waste, variation, and overburdening. And they said in that order. I invited Womack to visit with us in Fort Collins, Colorado in 1999. And he said that to the group. And I said, no, you got it backwards. You need to do it in the other order. You need to do it in overburdening, variation, then waste.
I like that.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so why do you like it, Jason?
Well, Felipe was telling me, and let me intro it and you complete. But I've been looking at, so before I even knew, but real quick, I have to say this. Hal called me and he was like, "Congrats on the Takt book. I can't believe we didn't just write this 25 years ago." And I'm like, yes, I got the first book. and then I stole all of his ideas and put it into my book. I thought that was funny. There's two things there. On projects as a superintendent, I never had a spot where I was like, oh, let's eliminate that waste. And then all of a sudden the project started working better. I always And accidentally, I didn't even know what takt planning, why it did what it did, but through creating stability, which was reducing the overburden on crews and project teams. You remember the YouTube videos I did 6 years ago. Jason's not saying what he means, but he's saying things that are like indicating that he's like creating stability. So team balance, not overburdening the team, not overburdening the crews, creating stability and reducing variation always were remove variation equals project success. So I've always been in the other two. And then I read books and I love Paul Akers, but eliminate waste. And I'm like, oh, we should implement that. But it was never a driving factor in the first place. And then Felipe was telling me yesterday, this thing about Taiichi Ohno. You want to share that real quick?
So yeah, real quick, it's been found out, it's becoming more well-known, Hal, maybe you've heard about it. But Taiichi said in order to keep Toyota having competitive advantage, when they opened up Toyota to invite the West in to see their processes, he purposely said some things about where the focus was to maintain competitive advantage. So he served up eliminating waste as like a big thing, when in reality, he was focused on flow. And just like you just told us now, that the information from the UK makes total sense and validates what's now coming out, that Taiichi was trying to gain some advantage. And they were the David and Goliath story against Ford and General Motors at the time, and Chrysler, when Chrysler was still a powerhouse.
Yeah.
So to hear you say that, you're just validating what I've been hearing and reading lately. They said one of his later books was translated into English, which was never meant to have been translated into English. He openly said, I purposely told the Americans that the system was focused on this in order so that we can maintain our advantage.
On the removal of waste.
On the removal of waste. Yeah, where flow is first. And then to go back to what you said before, Jason mentioned why I love going after overburden first is because in construction, Hal, as you know, working on projects, there's already so much systemic pressure on the people trying to do the best that they can. It always reminds me of what Deming said about the worker just trying to do their best with best efforts, and it's not enough because of how the system is operating on them, sometimes operating against them. So when you can remove overburden from people, now you have some capacity to look at variation and understand how variation is wreaking havoc on your system. And then you can get better about removing waste only to enable flow, because now you have some breathing room.
Yeah. I love it. Hal, teach us.
Yeah, so you've got to take care of overburdening first, and you know it's interesting how overburdening sort of gets addressed. Just think about when I first worked in the industry 27 years ago. 80-pound bags of ready mix or 80-pound bags of Portland cement were the usual. And you can buy 80-pound bags. They're widely available. But OSHA doesn't want you picking up an 80-pound bag. What's the limit? I think is it 50 or is it 60? It's one of those two. It's not 80.
Yeah, I think it's 50. And then nothing 25 over the shoulders, right? Something like that.
Something like that, right. And so we figured out, well, we've been overburdened, and you overburden a crane and you have a broken crane or something worse than a broken crane. And you don't get your loads right on a building and you've got overburdened frame. And there's all kind of like overburdening is a real big problem. So you need to start off with whether it's people, it's time, it's equipment, it needs to be right sized. And one of the more interesting overburdenings that occurs, and there's a really interesting article on this. It's called No Satisfaction at Toyota. And the overburdening is the amount of decisions that people have to make to do their job. And what Toyota discovered was that something like 11 decisions were required for someone to install certain parts. Every time they did it, which would be, in a shift, it might be 300 times. It might be 500 times in a shift, something like that, to make all those decisions. And you have what that produces is decision fatigue. Well, guess what? When you get fatigued, you make more errors. So instead of putting in the sandal colored sun visor, you end up putting in the gray one, where the rest of the interior is all sandal, right? And it's like in the factory, those two colors might not be distinguishable. But it's one of the decisions you have to make. And one of the things that the story, No Satisfaction at Toyota, the author's name's Fishman, it was published in Fast Company in December 2007. Yeah, December 2007. And it's like they figured out how to get some of the decisions out. So one of them is to kit interior parts that were going to be installed together. So now you take a tote and everything's there. It's all sandal colored. It's not the other color, right? And so you reduce it. And so they could reduce the number of decisions from something like 11 to something down like 5. That's huge because it turns out because of the number of times you do this, you didn't reduce one decision. You did it 500 times.
Yeah.
Right? Or you do 5 decisions, it's 2,500 decisions you reduced on this poor person. So take care of overburdening first, then take care of variation. And variation more so than waste. The lovely thing about Takt is that we take out the variation of pace, of frequency of performing. We now have drumbeat. We now have pace. And that, it's both it doesn't work out finely. Like when you do multi-residential and you get studios mixed in with 3 bedrooms that have a den with it as well. It's kind of like, and that's all in an apartment. How do you put it together so there's a relatively equal amount of work? Well, there won't be. That variety of work, not variation, the variety of work makes makes Takt for repetitive work non-trivial.
Yeah.
For non-recurring work, Takt is pretty straightforward. Set a 1-day pace, set a 2-day pace, hand off. It's like you only have to do it once. But when the mix of product, it doesn't have to mix a lot. Now you sometimes need a little bit more help, or you don't need quite as much help. You need a little bit different tools than you're doing. The cabinets that go into a studio, and the appliances, the biggest width might be 24 inches or maybe 28, not 30 or 36, right?
Yeah.
You have all kinds of, that's variety into the work, but then you have variation in performing the work. And the variety coupled with the variation that we encounter, Takt is a great countermeasure. It forces us to think through how are we going to do things so that we can come out like every 15 minutes on a cruise ship. I forget which cruise line it was. But it's a cruise line like Royal Caribbean. If they're going to renovate the whole, refresh the whole cruise ship, 3,000 rooms, the Takt time's 15 minutes. And they might have 28 operations in the room. And every 15 minutes, with no stops in between, every 15 minutes, a person or two go in and then come out. And another one goes in and comes out. And in the course of 7 hours, that room is back in service.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how I think, and I've probably surprised you a little bit how far away we're jamming. We probably got 20 more minutes on the podcast. You've heard me striving and struggling to understand these, and I'd like to just list them in order and ask you directly, where do you think the industry's understanding is wrong? Because obviously I'm coming at this from a builder, simplify it, understanding. And let me go through the list, and then I'd like to ask you this question.
Sure.
Hal, what do I have wrong? And the second question is, so I'm freaking talking to Felipe, and he's like, here's Brooks's law, here's Parkinson's law. And I'm like, okay, Hal and Felipe, can you just tell me all the laws so that I can stop hitting my head against the law? So I'm going to ask you one question. What do I understand wrong? And then second, what other laws am I missing, especially just right now for survival in the industry? So I'll go through the 4 that you have told me to research a little bit and how I understand them. And I know I don't have this right, I'm just saying applied to projects. So Little's law, that the number of flow units times the cycle time creates basically your overall throughput time. And I translate that into the formula that Marco and Yanosh taught me about takt time planning, and that small batch sizes can create, within certain parameters, shorter throughput times. And I feel like that law also tells me to limit work in process, finish as I go, and to prepare work ahead of time and to make sure that I'm optimizing that throughput. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to do one?
No, let's deal with them one at a time. So you understand it correctly. You don't misunderstand that. The small batch, a smaller batch will always produce a faster project. It's very simple. And the issue has to do with if you've got a batch of 10, at any point in time, you're only working on 1, so 9 are idle. You drop that down to a batch of 5, only 4 are idle. So you break a batch of 10 into 2 batches of 5. You only have 4 idle before you hand it over. You've done all 5, the same thing 5 times, and now you hand it over to the next trade. But get it down to 1, and you never have anything idle. You've got somebody working. So with the same number of people, it goes through faster. And that key, this is the one that Adam Hoots got so excited about. He initially was like saying, no, you need to get a lot of work out there started. And it's like, no, let's go through it. And it was, that's blown away by it. Right? Yeah. So that's one of the main things to come out of Little's Law. Now, yes, the Little's Law helps you figure out, okay, well, how long is it going to take when I takt things at different paces? You can do the math that way. But the implication that you identified was you need to prepare for the work. And it's like, well, what does that mean? It means make the work ready, make the people ready, make the work ready for the people, make the people ready for the work. At that moment, the paradox that they write about, Nicholas Modig and Per Ahlstrom write about in This Is Lean, we resolve the paradox. There isn't a trade-off when work is ready for people and people are ready for work.
Yeah.
You have flow and you have high productivity. Our problem is we don't take seriously the make-ready planning process that we use in the last planner system. In fact, in Agile, we typically have options. We have next, like queued up what's next. But inevitably what happens, and this happens in the software world a lot, and I have a strong background. I've been working for a software company, but I did many, many years ago before I joined the industry. We aren't making the work ready. So they begin doing something and they find, it's like, oh, I don't understand what that should connect to, or I don't understand what that variable is called in the system. And so they stop and then they have to go do some kind of research, as opposed to what you want is you want your options in like a Kanban world or Agile world. You want your options. Then you want ready. What's the ready work? And then you prioritize ready work into ready next. So that, and you can keep prioritizing ready next until you've started it, and then you don't mess with it anymore. You let it run.
Right.
Okay.
That's Scrum. Just so everybody Hal just described exactly what you do in Scrum, from getting your backlog, all the work you know you need to do, into sprint planning where in agile planning actually increases, just like in Takt. To set Takt up, you have to do some pre-planning ahead of time and do all those checks through procurement, design, all that. And you create buffers based on your experience and some heuristics on how much variation can I expect to have with this newer team. So that was beautiful.
So is the sprint backlog, is that the ready next?
So only if it's ready. So are they?
Hal, you described when you said
Ready.
the ready next, when Hal said that, and then you don't mess with it. The when you don't mess with it, Jason, is when the team now has it in their sprint backlog or their to-do list.
When they started working on it. Because up until the time they started working on it, it doesn't cost anything to reprioritize. Move one down, move that one up, and actually leave it out of the sprint if you need to. I mean, it depends on what's going on. And that you say that in the software world. In architecture and engineering, you want to do Scrumban or Kanban, not the straight Scrum kind of sprint approach. And for a lot of reasons, we can go into that another time. In fact, I'd love to talk to you about that, Felipe.
Well, let me.
We should be doing this in the job site trailer, visualizing all the work that happens in the trailer and using Kanban to manage it.
Yep.
And there are companies, Turner's doing it, Shinbro's doing it, and there's a few other companies that are using that in the job site office.
And McCarthy, because like just outside past the store, Jason, he had to walk past like 5 different Scrum boards, including a Scrums to get to this conference.
So but I know you two are going to jump on a podcast in the future, but just for my mental sanity, what is the make ready next in the columns on the Scrum board? Just so I can mentally survive. Can you just give me 3 sentences what I'm supposed to take away from what you just said from Scrum?
So your backlog is everything that is required that isn't in process.
Okay.
But it first arises as an option. It's something that you can do or you can't do. You might say no, right? But it's only an option.
Okay.
You review your options and you say, okay, these I want to go before those. And once you say that, you begin making things ready. So you've got a process, a pretty simple process that's all my options, my selected options to go forward, then make those options ready, and then have a ready next column, that's the stuff that gets prioritized. And you move stuff up and down in that ready next.
Okay.
What people do is they typically don't break it out and they just deal with what comes in, like RFIs that come in. They just deal with it in the order in which they arrive. Well,
FIFO, first in, first out, which is never going to be.
It's never going to satisfy what's going on in the field. Never. Yeah.
Okay. I think I understand that. Even if you have more columns or you just do the make ready vertically within the column in the Scrum board, you need to start even in backlog at the top, priority, making things ready. The sprint backlog, you need to make things ready and you need to have a ready next. I hate to call it batch, but yeah, okay. So ready next batch that will go into your in progress to complete. Okay, so I didn't mess that up too bad. Okay. Okay.
The word you're looking for is a state, a ready next state of the backlog.
Okay.
I don't want to start throwing a bunch of Scrum words on it because I want you to get your production laws.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah, let's get them. So how about bottlenecks next?
I was going to ask for Kingman's formula, but let's do bottlenecks. So the way I understand bottlenecks is that every system, well, let me say it in my way so you can correct everything I get wrong, but that every system will have bottlenecks, and that once you optimize or remove a bottleneck, then other bottlenecks will show up in the system. And as I've been looking at Takt, I'm not in CPM bashing mode, so nobody get after me, but I'm starting to feel like the bottlenecks really aren't in a critical path or a critical chain, that it's more of the process flow and the processes. I think that bottlenecks can show up anywhere. They can be individual items, they can be a process, but I'm seeing more of them as this process, this part of the process, this step in the process becomes the bottleneck. And so after reading the bottleneck rules based on yours and Adam's recommendation, and then I've read the goal before multiple times, that's how I understand that law. And I feel like when I see all three types of flow in Takt, workflow, trade flow, and logistical flow, and the Takt wagons and the cycle times within the Takt wagons, I feel like I can see bottlenecks more than in other scheduling systems. That's how I would say it.
Yeah. So the first thing to make this simple, when we're talking about a bottleneck, we're talking about a capacity aspect of this. So how much effort can we apply? How effective are they while they're applying that effort? Change the method they're using, and they can get, it's like opening the neck of the bottle. If you change the method and they're more effective, right? It has that effect. So thinking about Takt, we establish, let's just say, a 2-day pace, that all the work that's going to be done on a given set of flow units is going to happen in a 2-day pace. So that's when you talk about the Takt wagon is moving at a 2-day pace. Now, inevitably, the people on most of those wagons can perform better than in 2 days. Yep. But some of them are the limiting ones, and so they're bottlenecking you. And in effect, what you've done is you set the pace for the whole line. So Toyota has a Takt time on a production line right now for Camrys of about 90 seconds. They're about somewhere between 75 and 90, depending on the production line. And I know that because I visited it a little over a year ago. And it used to be 55 seconds. When you look at all the stations where the operations occur, let's just say there's 100 operations. There won't be more than 15% that operate at 70, something close to 75, like 72 seconds. There's a whole bunch that are operating down in the low 60s. There might be 1 or 2 that are down below 60. Making any improvements to the thing that's happening below 60 doesn't help the flow. Making the improvement to the dozen or so that are operating at 72 seconds improves the speed of the line.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing with Takt is we find our bottleneck, we establish our pace based on what the bottleneck activity can do, and then everybody falls in line. Everybody will have higher capacity on their wagon than otherwise. Now, what can you do? You could add a little bit more to their wagon. That it might be possible. So if you're a framer, you might add some blocking to the walls that doesn't get in the way of doing something else in the wall. Yeah. Otherwise, you add the blocking later, right?
That's about that too.
The other thing you do is you provide standby capacity, because going into multi-residential, it's like every 5th wagon has a 3-bedroom plus den apartment in it. We need another whole framer for that situation. So we pull somebody off a workable backlog and we put them on that particular wagon for 2 days, and then we let them off and they go back to workable backlog.
Yeah, I love it.
You want to go? Good.
Yeah. So that's bottlenecks.
Do you want to go to Kingman's formula?
No, I want to do variation.
Okay. So the way I understand,
That's a variation, right?
Yeah, it is.
He keeps trying to go back to Kingman's and he just can't get there.
I can't get there. Well, nope, we're not going to get there.
Here we are. You can add it.
The law of the effective variation from Modig's book and whatever I've looked up is that as variation increases, their throughput times increase. And if I understand that right, even though that's kind of commonsensical, I've been noticing a lot more where it shows up in cycle times, in project management, in instructions to people in the workforce, in schedules, everywhere, that, okay, as soon as we increase the variation here, our throughput times are going to increase. So that's the way I understand it. When I was using Takt, as an ignorant superintendent, not knowing why these things worked, I really latched onto the stability of the system. That if I can keep everything stable, I can see what I need to see, do what I need to do, and we can get done quicker. So lace me with some game. Tell me.
Yeah. So variation is sort of like the big evil in any process. If you ever put together a window system over a long wall, you've got to make sure that there's a way to take up the tolerances that you're encountering. If you're plus or minus, let's say, a half an inch, and you've got a whole bunch of stuff that are plus an eighth, do that 20 times, you now have a problem. If there wasn't a minus. And so curtain wall systems are designed today to be able to take up that kind of variation. But there's a lot of things that don't take up that kind of variation. And because it's not engineered for that kind of the kind of movement that you see. So people think that variation offsets each other, but
I'm not
it
sure.
actually stacks. Variation stacks.
We mean that our variation. Oh, you mean if I have variation on this side, variation that it would balance, but it actually stack. Okay, I got it.
It'll actually stack. Yeah. Now, when you play the parade of trades, what you realize is that in something as simple as a 7-step operation, and where the first step finishes early, but they got off to a slow start. Well, if they got off to a slow start, the second step doesn't have as much work in process to do, so they can't do better than the slow start that the previous person had. Well, variation compounds with dependence. And if you want to understand it, it's if you're reliable at the rate of 0.9, so I get 90% of what I said I'm going to get done, 0.9 to the 7th power, 0.9 times 0.9 times 0.9, 0.9, right? It's a really small number. So when you see percent promises complete, they're down below 50, and you look at the process, you can have people early in the process that are high, but there's no way the painter at the end of the process can be high because you've got all that variation. In fact, the painter at the end of the process bids the job, spray and back roll the first 2 coats, roll the third. How often does that happen? It doesn't. Do they lose money? No, they don't lose money because they bid the job based on their experience. And if they actually get to spray and back roll the first 2, they're in the money.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen because they're at the long chain. It could be 20 operations, 25, 28 operations. And so variation compounds dependence.
That's one of the fallacies. Sorry, Hal, I just getting so excited. I got to jump on this one. Like a lot of superintendents in construction and architects do the same thing in design. Early in the process, when we're in the quote unquote honeymoon phase and we get off to that slow start, people mistakenly think that down the chain, it could get made up. They're like, this job is 4 years long. I can lose time every month. And then if for year 1, and they think incorrectly that in year 2, 3, and 4, we can definitely make it up because I just gave up this time and I still finished. Like, yeah, you finished, but you created a chain reaction like you're talking about that poor painter can't make up.
Yeah.
I'm writing this down on my phone because the 2 things I just heard from y'all is that the effects of variation increases on dependency.
Right.
And that there's, how would I word it, that it's very rarely, what you all just said, it's very rarely made up at the end. It was
It has compound effects.
or compound effects show up at the end.
Yeah, it's because I'm dependent on you and you're dependent on Felipe that the variation that Felipe has coupled with the variation that you have, actually not coupled, and factoring to variation that you have makes it really tough. The incoming condition is tough on me.
Yep.
Do that 19 or 28 times, and it's you have no idea when things are going to finish when you've got these really long strings.
Yeah.
Now, what we've done with Takt, we have Takt as a countermeasure. That train, there's no variation. That car, every 2 days, is in a different spot, is a different spot, is in a different spot. And so we've taken out the variation, and so there's no compounding. I mean, there's dependence. You can't all of a sudden move one wagon in front of the other. It doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
Well, I can tell you that if for anybody listening to the pod, well, I have one question. I'm going to ask you all this in just a second. When I learned Scrum, and I was told, and I believe it, that Scrum is an answer for how to deal with variation instead of, maybe not variation, but changes, owner change. That it is a fast system that will allow you to adapt and be nimble and to be agile. And then with Takt, because we're able to optimize throughput times and gain buffers, you literally can create a Takt. Where's my hands? You can create a Takt buffer and more buffers at the end to absorb variation when you're not creating falsely large batch sizes. I'm not on a CPM rant, but if I, as a superintendent, just guess on batch sizes and create a critical path, then I haven't allowed myself, without a critical path just naturally showing up, I've created a situation where I'm not easily absorbing. So in my mind, my little, and I'm going to ask you all this question: how do I frame mentally Scrum, Takt, and CPM? Because in my mind, it's with Takt, with better throughput times, I can absorb variation. With Scrum, with the nimble teaming, I can absorb variation. I just don't understand how there's any way in a non-wise person CPM method that you can absorb variation, because you don't really have buffers, because it's driving you to a critical path. I will say so I'm going to ask you that question in a second. What I will say for anybody listening is that if you think these laws are basic, if you think the law of everything has bottlenecks, or the law of, no. I'm telling you, I'm walking here today. I'm 39 years old, and I've been doing construction for 24 years. And today, just by thinking about the law of variation, I'm learning more and more and more, and seeing it in more and more and more places. So just like, what's it, what's the swordsman? What's his name? Musashi. Just like Musashi said, investigate this further. Please investigate this further, people listening to this podcast. So while I got Hal and Felipe, am I framing these different systems well in their ability to adapt to variation, or am I not? Coach me.
Yes.
So we want to think about it in terms of, well, what's the nature of the work?
Okay.
And we put Takt effectively in 2-week sprints. Every 2 weeks, we've got something committed in software, or every 2 weeks we've got something else occurred in pre-con, or whatever it is we're doing, right? Or designing, we've got the engineers all working to a 2-week sprint that are integrated at end of every 2 weeks. So there's variation, we've got to take it up. The applying a sprint approach to design produces a pace and allows us to stay coordinated, because I know what's if I'm the mechanical, I know what the electrician's working on. And if it's not providing the power for my pumps, then we're now out of coordination.
I see.
Right? And so we get two kinds of variations. We got rid of the variation of when we're doing things, and we got rid of the variation that we're not working on the same things.
Okay.
Coordination, a thing that happens at 90% design, nothing that happens at 90% design is after 90% design is value added. It's all called coordination. which means we're picking up all that stuff that we missed along the way. And bulletin number one, construction bulletin number one, inevitably is full of electrical work. Why? Because everybody that was putting pumps, sensors, and anything else into the plan in the last week, the electrician wasn't picking that up. Like, yeah, their panel doesn't account for 4 more circuits. Their panel accounted for the circuits they knew and not for the 4 more.
That's funny.
Yeah. I was at a design pool, Hal, and it was early on prior to, we're just coming out, getting into schematic, and the electrical engineer kept saying to the architect, you haven't shared with me what I need to account for, and I'm just gonna wait for you. And unfortunately, the personality is the variation, Hal. The electrical engineer was contracted to a certain thing, and he wasn't going to not do something to get paid on that job. So he made guesses, and he guessed, and then the following month he had to do a bunch of rework.
Right.
So we're harming people again. It's going back to overburden. We don't take steps to limit the variation to allow us to deliver what we need to deliver, what we want to deliver, what your inner heart screams so that we can build something.
Yeah.
Then we create these problems for folks, and it causes more variation and more harm.
Yeah. And what you're describing, Felipe, that engineer, that electrical engineer needed to get paid. But hold on. The system as it's designed reinforces those behaviors. From inside their firm, it's looking like, well, if I start it, at least I can bill for starting it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that I have to do it over again, I stayed busy.
Yeah.
So
Well, we have 5 minutes.
Do we knock it out, boo?
We hit it, the Kingman's formula. So
Let's do it.
I researched that bad boy this way to that. And I felt for me that I had to adjust the terminology. So waiting time, and Kingman's formula in relation to Little's law, what I ended up with was that the time something takes is its original cycle time with the effect of its capacity, meaning how much is it being utilized, 80%, 60%, 90%, 100%, with variation included as well. And so I did a little formula just in my own little experiment that if I could say this work is a 5-day cycle time, and let's say I could quantify capacity utilization or variation by a percentage, I would take 5 days divided by 0.9 if we were at 90%, divided by 0.8 if for some reason I could quantify variation in percentage, and I would end up with like 8.5 days instead of 5 days, meaning that's the cycle time multiplied or divided, however we're doing it, but by its utilization by the variation that affects that process. And what I took it to mean is now in Takt, if I've got a 5-day Takt time, and this activity shows 4 days being utilized in that 5-day Takt time with a buffer as the 5th day, I need to look at this whether or not I'll fit in that Takt wagon by not just considering the original cycle time, but the cycle time with its utilization with the effective variation on that 4-day cycle time. And so that's what and then my mind opened up to, if I understand this at least partly correctly, oh my gosh, as soon as we hit that first Takt wagon, I can do a study and start improving and optimizing that throughout the rest of the Takt phase. And I can do an analysis even before I get started and really refine and level my work steps within those Takt wagons, understanding the effective capacity and the utilization and the effects of variation. So lace me with some game.
yeah, so
He's like,
let's start without the. Let's start with there's no Takt wagon.
okay.
I say that if you think about a highway
Okay.
at rush hour, there's 2 lanes on a 4-lane highway that have the highest delay.
Okay.
The rightmost lane and the leftmost lane
Yep.
for different reasons. The right lane because it has high variation, getting on, getting off, and lots of people tapping their brake along the way. The left lane because it has high utilization. Now, yes, they're trying to go fast, so everybody moves into that lane, so the lane gets higher utilized. The middle two lanes, the middle two lanes are during rush hour are generally the better places to be.
Takt.
Because they have lower utilization and they're a little bit further, that makes them a little further apart. So a tap on the brakes doesn't ripple to everybody's tapping on the brakes. They're able to take up that variation because it's lower utilization. Follow that? Now, in the major metropolitan areas, to deal with this problem on the right-hand lane with all that, the variation, is they actually have a stoplight at the bottom of the ramp. And that you don't go until the light goes green, and the light goes green every 6 seconds. And so they've normalized the arrival rate or the interruption rate into that first lane, and that people can see it coming at a certain pace, and it just naturally moves in. The high occupancy lanes is a way of normalizing it, particularly when you charge for it. You bleed stuff off, put 3 people in a car or whatever the deal is for high occupancy or paying, and you bleed people off who want to just go fast, and they are lower utilized. Now, how does that work with us in construction? And I'm saying this before the wagons, before Takt.
Okay.
You've got to look at, for any given crew and the operations that they have to perform in a given period of time, how much of that time do they need to be working? Do they need to be working on all of it? I remember on the Pentagon, the remodel of the Pentagon, that those wedges were 5-day wedges. And for the most part, everybody needed something like 4.5 days to do the work, but not Southland Industries when they first worked there. When they first worked there for Hensel Phelps, as you remember, they had 5.5 days. Well, there's no way you're going to get access to the building late in the day to pick up that half day or on a Saturday. What Southland had to do right away is go to work on their time, so that when they encountered variation, it didn't cause them to go beyond the end of the day, or the end of the week, because they were 5-day techs. Yeah. So it didn't cause them to go beyond the end of the day. And so they figured out through improvements, through some prefabrication. They learned a lot about prefabrication at that time. You talk to Victor Sanvito, I think he's got some of those stories. They learned about how to, like, on purpose, always get it done in 4.5 days. Yeah.
Okay. So how is that different than what I said?
You need to know how utilized are you?
Oh, okay.
And we're not even looking at how utilized are you and how much variation is there in the work.
Okay.
If you're highly utilized and if you're using up almost all of that time, but you have variation that causes you to go over,
yeah,
you're doing yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
I think even just knowing that, like, if we tell trade partners, look, if you're telling me it's 5 days, is it 5 days at 100%? Or are you leaving yourself a buffer within that cycle time? Just even knowing the concept will be helpful.
Yeah, if you're putting the other laws into place, the production laws, like, and you find out they're closer to that 100%,
yeah,
I'm going to default to let's reduce down their capacity so they can absorb some more of that variation, like the stoplight on the right-hand lane to normalize that's coming in. Like Southland, they figure out we got to be 4.5 because there's going to be variation once we get past the gate. Yeah. Right. So that's a great thing to take to people.
So it's 2:29:29. And if I can't finish a podcast on time, the people will say I can't finish a job on time. So Hal, you have to go to another meeting. I want you to know that you're amazing and this is great. So let's do this on the count of 3. We're going to say on we go. So 1, 2, 3, on we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.